G'day there. You're watching the Aussie BIM Guru, and today on the channel we're going to be looking at creating worksets. So the point here isn't really just to create worksets, it's to show that through a good toolbar setup, we can very quickly create entirely new commands with just a few additions to our setup. So in this case, we'll be leveraging a lot of the components we've already used, like progress bars, transactions, collectors, all sorts of things. But we're going to construct a tool from the ground up, add it to the ribbon, associate a command class to it, extend the document class, do lots of things that we've already done, but in order to create a new tool. Now, sneakily, we are going to be doing more with this tool in the next lesson because this tool is only going to want to run in certain circumstances. But I'm going to be building upon what we already have. So if you haven't been following along to this point, feel free to grab a copy of my toolbar off of GitHub if you'd like to follow along, and you can start from the point that I'm at as well. So we're going to do a few things. Firstly, we're going to extend the document class, and we're going to have a look at the API that we're going to use to collect worksets, which is something we haven't really learnt yet. And then we're going to look at setting up our buttons on the ribbon, mostly through copying code that we already have and just replacing some things. And finally, setting up our actual command class. And I'm sort of sneakily doing this so that we can introduce another concept in our next lesson, which is availability, which will allow us to control this tool and mean that we only are able to run this tool when we're in a work shared document. So we'll show you how to do that in the next lesson as well. So very quickly, I'm going to jump over to the Revit API. So far we've been collecting elements using filtered element collectors. Worksets are different because worksets aren't actually elements as far as I know. They have to be collected using a filtered workset collector. Which effectively behaves almost the same way as a filtered element collector and how we establish it. The difference is that there's some different methods, such as of kind, which in this case we can use to specify the types of worksets we'd like to retrieve. In this case, workset kind is an enumeration, and we're generally going to be targeting user worksets that have been created by the user, including workset 1 and shared levels and grids. The rest of these generally deal with worksets behind the scenes that handle work sharing relationships, which we're generally going to want to leave alone because they really are just built in, doing their purpose. We don't really want to interfere with them. And of course, we are ultimately dealing with worksets, which have a class. But in this case, I believe if you have a look at properties, I'm not sure if we're inheriting these from element. We're not. We're inheriting them from workset preview. So in this case, the workset class, if we have a look at it, only inherits workset preview. It doesn't inherit element. So we can't always just assume everything can behave like an element in Revit, and worksets are a good exception to that rule. Anyway, let's jump over to our add-in. So in this case, we could start in a few different places. I'm going to begin by just establishing the collector that we'll use to collect worksets. So we're going to do that in our extensions under document extension. And effectively, we have some specific collectors already available. So let's just borrow one. In this case, I will just borrow the revisions collector. And we're, in this case, going to get a list of worksets. And I'll just delete that. And we're going to call our method getWorksets with ext on the front, given it's an extension method. And of course, we are in this case extending the document with an option to sort them by name. So one difference is we are going to be collecting our worksets in a different way to what we've done before. So I'm going to say var worksets is equal to doc.filtered, new workset, filtered workset collector. So not filtered element collector, targeting document. So we could create an extension for the document class for this, but in this case, workset collectors are very specific, so I don't really see a point. And we need to now specify of kind, like we saw before. And in this case, we're going to specify the workset kind as an enumeration, targeting user worksets only. In this case, we also need to either cast to worksets, but there is actually a filtered element collector method called toWorksets. But from here, I will make it a list using, in this case, the last step involving system link, just to get a list instead of, I think, an I list, I believe this finishes with. I just prefer to be consistent and work with lists generally. Now that we have this, we can either sort them or not sort them. So in this case, in the case that we want to sort, we will use worksets, and we'll do order by, in this case, w.name. So we're using a lambda function just to get the name of the worksets, order them as that, and then to list. Otherwise, we would return worksets. And that's literally it. That's how simple it is to just set up a basic collector to get all work sets in the document. So get all work sets in document. If we wanted to, we could also build a form to select work sets from, and this is very easy as well. Again, we can really just borrow another form that pretty much already does the job. So let's just take our sheets form and just adjust it to suit work sets. I generally like to create a form for a collector when I have one, just in case later on I decide to let a user select from a list. So in this case, instead of select sheets, it will be select work sets. In this case, document is fine, title is fine, multi-select and sorted is fine, but we don't need the include placeholders argument. Default title will of course now be select work sets from list or select a work set from the list. Get sheets is now of course get work sets. I'm just gonna right click and rename this, and I can actually refactor its use later on in the code. Of course, we are now calling out get work sets instead of get sheets, which is now an extension method on the document class. Processing into keys, so in this case, we'll just again, the key in this case will just be the work set name to a list, and in this case, the values will be the work sets as objects. And we don't have to change anything with our select from list method. And we now have a perfectly valid means of selecting work sets from a list. And that's it. Given we've already got some great examples we can already draw upon, we can just change them slightly and we have entirely new methods available. So that is our document class effectively extended. The next step is we need to actually go and set up our toolbar button. So in this case, I already do have some icons set up. So I have 16 and 32 pixel at 96 dpi icons, one for my work sets, which will be a pull down, one for my work set creation button, which will be a push button. You may recall that in this case, we use the naming standard of the pull down underscore the command name with the pixel resolution on the end. And in the case of the pull down, there doesn't need to be a command on the end. And this will line up nicely to our commands in our toolbar. So I'm just going to go to resources and add existing items. And in this case, we'll be firstly adding our 16 pixel resolution icons and then our 32. Whoops, don't want to make a new folder. So we'll add those 32-bit icons as well. And we do, of course, also need to provide tooltips for them as well. So first of all, for the pull down, which we'll call worksets, I believe. I'll just double check, no, workset. Tools related to worksets. And then we also have workset underscore create. And this one will create worksets from a list of common names. And then we of course need to go back to our startup method and also add this pull down and this push button. So in our startup method, we'll come to our command examples. And in this case, we will just probably just take all of these and do it again. So in this case, we will create, we don't need to create the tools panel that already exists, but we do need to add the worksets pull down. So again, this will now become pull down workset. And in this case, we're adding a button called workset. And we'll be targeting the command group in our toolbar structure that we'll create soon called cmds underscore workset. And then to the pull down for workset, we're adding a push button called create worksets. And in this case, it will be under the workset commands and it will be command underscore create. So these all line up with the icon names, the tooltip names. This is how it all basically builds itself. The next thing we need to do is actually add a command. So I need to add a new item. In this case, it'll be a class and it will be called cmds underscore workset. And just to borrow from what we did previously, we can see we have guru.cmds underscore revision. Well, likewise, we're going to have guru.cmds underscore workset. In this case, we're going to want to just make a command class. So I'm just going to borrow this part of the revision command class, but we'll just quickly explain it after, just in case you've forgotten how it works. So effectively, we have a command that will engage in transactions. So we do need to specify this property. I'm going to call this cmd_create, like we set up to do. And then we have a command class method execute, which is using an interface, and we're able to collect the UI application, the UI document, and most importantly, the document. The reason why we have an error here is we're currently returning nothing. So we do need to return a result eventually to satisfy the command class. But now if I boot up Revit, we should see the pull down and the push button available. And at the moment, this command will just do nothing, but this should be available now. So we might just quickly test this to make sure it has in fact worked. Debug R23, and we'll just hit run. And we should hopefully see a new pull down with push button with the tooltips registering. And after that, we're in a good position to write our command behavior. But we're effectively going to be able to go from start to finish in this tutorial. So we're about not quite halfway through the process. All that is left is we have to actually build our command. And we're going to borrow some of the code from our revision command from before in order to implement a progress bar. So that will definitely help as well. So if I just quickly boot up any old project under Guru, we should now have another nice little push button. Fingers crossed. And there it is, workset, create workset. There's our tooltip, and I can run it. So we're in a good position to begin actually writing our command. So I'm going to close Revit while I do this. You can leave it open, but sometimes your commands might need you to close Revit, so I generally don't see a point in having Revit open. Now, outside of the actual command execution itself, I am going to include a private list of workset names that we'd like to add. So I'm going to make this a private static read-only, so it can't be changed, list of strings. And we'll call this workset names. It's going to be a new list of strings. And in this list, I'm going to include a list of workset names I'd like to be presented to the user to add to their document. So in this case, I'll just use our AR interior. And again, don't judge my standard, it's up to me. AR facade, without that little French letter. AR structure. AR fit out. AR site. And in this case, I'll just set precedent for a link. I'll just do Z_link DWG survey, because we should usually have a survey. Z_link RVT model name. So this sort of sets precedent. Maybe we can just do RVT XXX, and maybe DWG XXX. It's up to people what they'd like to include. That's usually a small little list of workset possibilities, but you could add more. You could store this as a resource in your program and instead stream its contents using a manifest. But in this case, we're just going to make it a part of the command, given that it really relates to it. Now we can access this privately within the context of our command class, which we will do later. So now that we have our document, the first thing we need to do is get worksets and names. Now we might also make sure the document is work shared. Because if the document isn't work shared, this command effectively shouldn't run. So I'm going to say if the document is work shared, then great. But I'm going to say what happens if the document is not work shared. And we're going to return, in this case, a form. So I do need to go and add my forms namespace, which I usually associate to gforms, gguru.forms. Whilst I'm here, I also know I'm going to need work sharing utilities as well. So I'm going to add my work sharing utilities, which we built in a previous lesson, so that we can use them. But for now, I just want to add a custom cancelled message, and we'll say document is not work shared. And that will return, in this case, a cancelled result and finish our command at that point. Assuming we get past this, we know we're now dealing with a work shared document, and we can do things like ask for workset. I'm going to say var worksets equals doc, and we can call on our extension method to get worksets. In this case, sorted will be true, so we don't need to specify it. And then I'll say var workset names is equal to worksets select name to list. So we're using system link, in this case, just to convert that list of worksets to a list of names that line up to it. At this point, we also need to understand which worksets aren't contained in our document that are contained in our list of worksets that we'd like to add. So we're now going to get the unused, or the workset names that are not present in our standard list, which we can access privately. So I'll say in this case, var unused names is equal to the names of the worksets we currently have. And I'll say where, in this case, the name, because we're using names, not namespace, we need names. And we're going to say where the workset names do not contain this. So in this case, we're actually looking for workset names with a capital. And in this case, we're looking for where the workset names are not contained to a list. So what we actually need there is workset names. So what we should be left there is any workset names that are currently, no, sorry, we've done that the wrong way around. We need that to actually be the workset names from up here, where the workset names from below do not. So in this case, it will be these names where the name is not available in these, so it doesn't exist in the document, to a list. Now at this point we can check, do we actually have any missing worksets? We might not. So we'll say cancel if no missing worksets, because we might have all the standard worksets already in here. So I'm going to say if unused names count is equal to 0, then we could again just return a cancelled message. Return gform custom cancelled, and we can say all standard worksets are available. Whilst we're here, we're also going to account for our standard shared levels and grids name. I might actually, yeah, I'll just store it up here. So I'm going to say private static. In this case, we're looking for a read-only variable, and it's going to just be a single string, but this will be the grids workset name. And in this case, we're going to be looking for the standard name, or no, not the standard name, sorry, our name. So we'll say shared levels grids, or maybe we'll just say levels and grids. Shared isn't really necessary. So what we're going to do later in our script is we're going to check, is the typical workset that Revit creates for levels and grids present? And if so, we can rename it because we may wish to give it a more standard name to our system. Generally, we're going to leave workset 1 alone if it's available. I tend to like just leaving it alone because it does a lot of system things that shouldn't really be interfered with. Again, not everyone's going to follow that standard, just mine. But in this case, we're at a point where we know there are some missing workset names from our standard that we'd like to offer for the user to add. So we're going to choose the names from a list. Choose the missing names from a list, because they may not want to add all of them. They might just want to add some of them. So we're going to create a form result. And in this case, we're going to make a form. So we're going to use our select from list form. And in this case, we're going to need the keys and the values. Now we already have keys. So keys in this case is going to be equal to workset, sorry, unused names. Values is going to be equal to unused names, but we're going to cast them to objects because that is the data type that our values require to be passed through. In this case, we do want a multi-select, which is by default true, but we will specify a title as well. We'll say select worksets to add to document. So now we've got a form presented to the user. We're now going to say if the form result, when it's finished, is cancelled, then we also want to cancel our command. But if it's not, then we know we've got workset names to use. So we can say vir chosen workset names is equal to the form result objects. And we're going to cast them back to strings because we know they came from strings. So it's safe cast to list. So we now have the workset names that the user has chosen to add, assuming they did choose some. But at this point, before we dive into actually adding all of our worksets, the first thing we want to do is check if the default shared levels and grid workset is available, and if it is, offer to rename it, so give the user a choice. So in this case, first of all, we need to check if this is actually available. So I'm going to say offer to rename grids workset if present. So we need to check if the original workset names, not the unused ones, contains it, which in this case is going to be called shared levels and grids with uppercase noted. then in this case, we want to ask the user if they'd like to replace the name. So we'll say ask renaming. So again, we're going to say that we want to give them the opportunity to confirm. So we'll say confirm rename result is equal to gform.custom.message. So in this case, we're asking them a question. So the title will be rename workset. The message in this case is going to notify the user. The typical or the default grids and levels workset has been found. Would you like to rename it? And I might put that last segment on a new line. So what I can do is go new line, enter, and you can see that it adds a plus and lets us keep building that form message. Finally, we want this to be a yes, no. Remember, we can turn this into a question that can return an affirmative outcome if the user says yes. So at that point, we can now check if we said yes. And I'll say if, in this case, confirm result is affirmative, which is yes, then now we do in fact want to rename this workset. So we first need to actually get the workset. So an easy way to do this, because we know it exists, it's contained, we're going to get an index. So in workset names, we're going to get the index of, and in this case, I'm just going to borrow this name again. And then we're going to get that workset, which we have before from our list of worksets. Now we need to check if we can actually edit this workset. This workset might be checked out by another user. So we'll say if we can edit it. So in this case, we're going to have to take our workset and see if it's editable. Now in this case, I believe there's a property for this. Yes, is it editable? So we don't actually need our work sharing utilities for this. So now we want to use a transaction to do this. Now we're not going to use a progress bar because there's only one step. So we're just going to say rename it. We're going to say using VART as a new transaction. In the document, in this case, we're going to say guru rename workset or rename grids workset. So they see it in the undo dialog. We're going to start our transaction like we have before. And we're finally, when we're done, we're going to commit it. So what do we do in between here? Well, we're actually going to need to use some Revit API. So we're going to be using a class called workset table, which we can refer to directly. And the method we like to call is rename workset. So in this case, we have the document, we have the workset ID, which we currently have the workset, but we can get its ID pretty easily. And finally, the name that we'd like to give it. So in this case, I'm going to call on the workset table class, the rename workset method, and we can see we're prompted for the document, the grids workset ID. So we're calling on the ID property. And in this case, the name, which in this case we've declared up here as a private variable. This is going to be the grids workset name. And at this point, this should now rename our grids and levels workset. Now, if you want to, you can always show a form saying that the workset was not editable, proceed to create the rest. So we can do that. So if we can't, we're never actually going to see this part of the code in this tutorial, but we could always just say gform custom message or maybe error. And we can say the workset was not editable. Remaining worksets will now be created. Anyway, notice that I'm not returning this, so this isn't going to finish the script. This is just showing a message to the user. There's no yes or no. It's just telling us an error happened and we're going to keep going. So this step is just to deal with renaming the workset. The next step is we actually need to add the worksets. So we're going to be using a progress bar to do this. I'm probably going to hijack the majority of a progress bar from another. Well, actually, no, we'll write it from scratch just in case. It's good to recap. So first of all, we need to actually get progress bar properties. So if you'll recall in the revision command, we need to get two properties. One is how many objects do we have, and one is what is the step between progress. So in this case, I'm going to make an integer, and I'm just going to call this progress total. And this is going to be equal to the chosen workset names count. Then we also, in this case, need to get a progress step, which is the time we're going to delay the progress between each creation. And you might recall in this case, we have a progress delay under utilities that we built in the last lesson, I believe it was, or the one before. And this will add a delay based on the number of objects to try and roughly cover a 3-second window. Now we're actually going to use a progress bar. So I'll say using, so we're going to declare a progress bar, which from a previous lesson, which we created this in, we need to provide a task name. So I'll say creating worksets. In this case, the progress bar total is progress total, and the remainder is just default values. So we do want to show progress, and we also want this to be a cancelable process as well. We then need to use a transaction because we are making changes to the document. So again, we're going to say using bar t equals new transaction. Whoop. In this case, the document and also the name for the undo stack. We'll just call this create worksets. So of course, the first thing we do is start our progress bar, or our transaction, sorry. And later on, we're going to commit our progress bar when we're done, but we'll use the progress bar class to do that. So now we actually need to add the worksets. So add the worksets. So I'm going to say for each, now I've made an error here. Syntax error. Just try that again. I think I've missed a bracket here. There we go. So we're going to say for each bar name in chosen workset names. And then in here, we're going to try and create those worksets. So first of all, we need to check for cancellation. Given we have a progress bar that can be cancelled, so I'll say if pb cancel check, and I'll pass the transaction to it, because if you recall correctly, this actually rolls back the transaction as well as cancelling. But we will return result cancelled if we encounter a cancellation during this process, because we just want to stop at that point. But then we'll create the workset. So we can use the workset class to do this. Workset.create is the method we'll use. And in this case, it's going to ask for two things, the document and the name. So it's very straightforward. We then actually need to just add or increment progress. So first of all, we're going to sleep using thread.sleep with the progress step as the amount of time we want to sleep for to put a delay in there. And then we call the progress increment to go to the next step on the progress bar. Finally, we're committing by passing our transaction to the progress bar to finish the progress bar and also commit the transaction. And that is pretty much it. Probably the last thing we might want to do is just tell the user the process is finished. So I'm going to return a gform, custom completed message, which we built in an earlier lesson. And we're just going to say in this case, how many worksets were created. So we do need to reference properties. So we'll use a $sign to allow properties in this string. And we'll say progress total, Now in this case, we're trying to reference a variable from before, progress total. Which for some reason it's not happy to give me access to. That's interesting. Something funny going on here. I think I'm too far outside our command. I'm actually outside the command, so I need to actually be here. Yes, there we go. That should give me access to progress total. And we can say that many worksets created, and we can put worksets with a bracket just in case we created one. And then we'll just say final message to user. So that's it. We've created a whole new command, built the button for it, built a couple of new extensions for it as well, and that's it. It didn't take too long. Again, I'll just tidy this up. I'll say these belong to Guru, these belong to Autodesk, and we have our workset classes, and that's it. So let's actually just test and run our command. But I just really wanted to use this lesson to show, okay, we got an error. Not all code paths return a value, so let's figure out what I've done wrong here. Where am I not returning a value? Okay, let's figure this one out. What level are we at? Okay. I forgot to encapsulate one level deeper here. That's why I was sitting at the wrong level. I was a bit confused there for a second. I think this should fix it. So the good thing with encapsulation is if you get it wrong and you cut and paste your code, generally the encapsulation will sort of fix itself up. So that's put it all back out to the right level. There we go. That's why I was getting confused before. Now, if I cut and paste this here, yep, that fixes the encapsulation. I think that should rationalize that error. So this was actually sitting at the wrong level. This was all sitting within, within the if statement, which meant that we would have only had worksets being created if we actually had one called shared levels and grids, which obviously is wrong. Now we can test. So let's smash that test button. No errors, off we go. Full command created in a pretty short amount of time. And now if we ever have a command related to worksets, we now have some utilities to collect worksets, pick them from a list. It's pretty flexible. And just remember about 20 lessons ago when we had nothing, we now have a full set of utility that we can take advantage of. So let's just jump into the ugly house that everyone knows very well. I'm sorry, the very attractive house. No offense, Sam. So in this case, let's first of all just try running this in a non-workshared document. We can see the document is not workshared and the task is cancelled. Let's create worksets by initiating them, which is going to create a shared levels and grids workset and a workset 1. There they are. Now let's try running. So we can see that our list of worksets triggers, which is correct. Let's just add all of them. We've picked up that the default workset for grids and levels has been found. Would you like to rename it? In this case, we will say yes. It's creating worksets, and we can obviously cancel this. 7 worksets created. There's our worksets. Shared levels and grids has been renamed, and there we go, a full command. If I try running this again, all standard worksets are available. Cancel. Very flexible command in probably about 100 lines of functional code. But that's effectively it. So hopefully that was a interesting tutorial just showing how you can build a workflow from the ground up. Obviously using a lot of utility that we've built already, but it's going to get easier and easier as we build more and more through these tutorials. So again, if you'd like to see more examples of these types of commands and how I implement all these things we're using, feel free to check out my toolbar over at GWiz, and I look forward to sharing how we can add some availability to this command in our next lesson, which is more of a general technique, less of a command. If you like what you see, feel free to like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. You can reach me at the email here or in the comments below, and I look forward to seeing you in future similar videos. Thanks. Take care. Bye.